The first commercial video game was released in 1971. It was called Computer Space, it was unplayable by anyone who had not read the manual, and it sold poorly. 54 years later, the global video game industry generates more revenue than the global film and music industries combined. In those 54 years, the medium has accumulated a deep archive of strange, unreleased, hostile, and unexplained material. What follows is a guided descent through the layers of that archive. Tier 1, the mainstream. The games and the stories that have entered general culture. At this tier, the famous narratives. Atari's 1983 collapse, Nintendo's 1985 rescue of the American console market, Sega's rise and decline, Sony's PlayStation dynasty, Microsoft's Xbox, Steam's transformation of PC gaming, the mobile gaming boom, the streamer economy, the famous stories the industry tells about itself. Howard Scott Warshaw was given 5 weeks to develop the Atari 2600 adaptation of E.T. the Extraterrestrial in 1982. He delivered a broken, frustrating game. Atari overproduced cartridges. The unsold inventory was bulldozed into a landfill in Alamordo, New Mexico in 1983. The story became apocryphal. In 2014, a documentary crew excavated the landfill. The cartridges were there. The myth was real. The Konami code, the cheat code that unlocked 30 extra lives in the 1986 game Contra, has become a piece of universal pop folklore. It was originally written by a single Konami programmer, Kazuhisa Hashimoto, because he found the game too difficult to playtest. He left the code in by mistake. Hashimoto died in 2020. The code outlived him by every measure. The video game crash of 1983, the Nintendo Monopoly hearings, the arrival of online multiplayer, the launch of Twitch, the rise of esports. These are the surface tier stories. They are taught in business schools, in film documentaries, in industry retrospectives. Every gamer over a certain age knows them. Below them, the medium has older and more uncomfortable layers. Tier 2, the cult mysteries. Stories that every veteran gamer has heard that have spawned long-running internet investigations, but that have not crossed into general culture. Polybius. In the early 1980 seconds, an arcade cabinet supposedly appeared in pizza parlors and arcades around Portland. Oregon, the cabinet was unlabeled. The game was a vector graphics puzzle. Players reported nausea, vivid nightmares, and episodes of amnesia. Within a month, the cabinets were collected by anonymous men in suits. The cabinets disappeared. No verified Polybius cabinet has ever been physically located. The earliest written reference to Polybius is from a singlecoinop.org forum post in the year 2000. The story has the structure of folklore. It is treated with the seriousness of history. Both can be true. The story is real even if the cabinet is not. Then drowned. In 2010, a college student named Alex Hall posted a series of forum messages and YouTube videos describing a haunted copy of The Legend of Zelda, Majora's Mask. The cartridge had been bought used. It contained a save file labeled Ben. The save file behaved as if a deceased boy were inhabiting the game. Statues moved in directions they should not move. The game seemed to know when the player was watching. The story was eventually revealed as an extended fiction by Hall, then a film student. It is now considered one of the foundational works of internet horror. The narrative format that followed, the creepypasta, has shaped a decade of online storytelling. The cartridge in the videos was real. The haunting was a story. The audience treated the story as if it might be real, and the line between the two has been deliberately blurred ever since. The kill switch story. In 1989, a small Soviet-era game studio called Karvina supposedly released a horror title called Kill Switch. The game was distributed on 5,000 cartridges. Each cartridge would erase itself after a single playthrough. By design, no second playthrough was possible. Only one Kill Switch cartridge has ever appeared on the secondary market. It sold at auction in 2005 for over $700 to a Japanese collector named Yamamoto Ryuichi. He uploaded a video of himself playing the game and then never released another. Karvina, Yamamoto, and Kill Switch are almost certainly all fictional. The original 2008 essay by Catherine M. Vellante that introduced them was published as creative writing, but the story has been reposted as if true thousands of times. It has become difficult to find any reference to Kill Switch that acknowledges its fictional origin. Lavender Town Syndrome. The original Japanese release of Pokemon Red and Green in 1996 included a town with a melancholy musical theme played in a specific high-frequency arrangement. Internet folklore later claimed that Japanese children who heard the theme on the small Game Boy speakers became sick, depressed, or in extreme tellings killed themselves. The story is sometimes called the Lavender Town Syndrome. The medical reports the story relies on do not exist. The Japanese health authorities have no record of the cluster. The theme itself is real. It was composed by Junichi Masuda. It is in fact musically unsettling. The deaths are not. At Tier 2, the cult mysteries follow a pattern. A real artifact, a cartridge, a track, a screenshot, an unverifiable claim around it. Decades of internet repetition. Below this tier, the stories become harder to dismiss. Tier 3, lost and cancelled games. Verified projects that were either never released, exist only in fragments, or were withdrawn from circulation after release. Star Fox 2. Developed for the Super Nintendo by Argonaut Software, completed in late 1995, never released. Nintendo canceled the launch because the console generation was ending. The fully completed ROM circulated among collectors for 2 decades. Nintendo finally released it officially in 2017, as part of the SNES Classic Mini, 22 years after its completion. A finished game existed for 22 years in a vault. Cybermorph and the Atari Jaguar's lost titles. The Atari Jaguar console launched in 1993 and failed commercially within 3 years. During its short life, dozens of games were announced and never released. AVP for Jaguar, a notable success. Highlander never released. Battle Wheels never released. Fear never released. Some of these titles exist as partially completed prototypes that have surfaced over decades, sold by former developers or recovered from old storage units. Others have simply vanished. The development files in many cases do not exist anymore. Floppy disks degrade in 20 years. Hard drives die. Memories of who held the data go, with the developers who retire and pass. Resident Evil 1.5. The original Resident Evil 2 was developed under producer Yoshiki Okamoto and reached an estimated 70% completion before being scrapped. The game would have starred Leon Kennedy and a different female protagonist, Elza Walker, and would have taken place in a different version of Raccoon City. Capcom restarted the project from near zero, redesigning the heroine into Claire Redfield, redesigning the city, and shipping in 1998 what we now call Resident Evil 2. The original 1.5 build exists in fragmentary form on dev disks that have been gradually leaked into preservation communities over the past 2 decades. A partially playable build was made public in 2013. It is not a complete game, it is a glimpse of a complete game that was never finished. Marble Madness Dissect. Atari Games announced a sequel to Marble Madness in 1991 and built completed cabinets for arcade location testing. The cabinets were placed in real arcades. Player feedback was unenthusiastic. Atari Games canceled the production run. The few completed Marble Madness the Secondnets were destroyed or warehoused, and most have been lost. As of the current decade, exactly one verified Marble Madness the Second cabinet is in the hands of a private collector. The original ROM has been preserved and is playable in emulation. The physical hardware is, for practical purposes, extinct. Banjo-Kazooie related cancellations. Rare Limited, the British developer behind Donkey Kong Country, GoldenEye, 007, and Banjo-Kazooie, has the largest catalog of cancelled titles of any major studio. Among them, 12 Tales, Conquer 64, Dinosaur Planet, Donkey Kong Racing for the GameCube, Perfect Dark Zero on the original Xbox. Each one was at various stages of completion. Most were reshaped, restaffed, or absorbed into other projects. Rare was acquired by Microsoft in 2002. Several of these projects were lost in the transition. Internal video footage of unreleased Rare titles has surfaced periodically through ex-employees over the past 2 decades. The Lost Games catalog is enormous. Every major publisher has hundreds of cancelled projects in its history. Most will never be recovered. At the next tier, the Lost Games problem stops being about commercial failure and starts being about deliberate erasure. Tier 4, the banned and the withdrawn. Games that were released, then removed from sale, sometimes destroyed, sometimes erased entirely from corporate records. Custer's Revenge. Released in 1982 by a small studio called Mystique for the Atari 2600. Custer's Revenge depicted a pixelated cavalry officer assaulting a tied Native American woman. The game was protested. It was the subject of legal action. Several jurisdictions, including Oklahoma, attempted to ban its sale. The publisher went bankrupt within 2 years. The original cartridges continued circulating on the secondary market. The game has never been re-released and is generally considered the most notorious commercial title in Atari 2600 history. Mystique published 2 other adult titles in the same period. All 3 remain in collector circulation. None has been published since 1983. Manhunt 2. Rockstar Games released Manhunt in 2003 and Manhunt 2 in 2007. Both titles depicted player-controlled killings of opposing characters in extended graphic detail. Manhunt 2 was the first game to receive an AO, adults only, rating from the ESRB, Sony, and Nintendo. Who do not license AO-rated titles would not carry the game. Rockstar edited the title to receive a mature rating. The original AO version exists on developer machines and a small number of leaked builds. The retail version is the censored one. Manhunt 2 was banned outright in the United Kingdom for several months pending an appeal. In Ireland, it remains banned. The British Board of Film Classification eventually permitted release. The Irish prohibition has never been lifted. 6 Days in Fallujah. Originally developed by Atomic Games in collaboration with United States Marines, who had served in the Second Battle of Fallujah in 2004, the game was to be a tactical shooter set in the actual battle. The project was announced in 2009. Konami, the originally attached publisher, withdrew within weeks under pressure from veterans groups and anti-war advocates. Atomic Games was dissolved. The project was revived more than a decade later by a different studio, Highwire Games, with a different scope. The original Atomic Games version no longer exists in playable form. The leaked development materials suggest a far more documentary-style title than what eventually shipped. Hatred, a 2015 isometric shooter by Polish studio Destructive Creations, in which the player controls a misanthrope on a sustained killing spree. The game was briefly removed from Steam's pre-release greenlight platform before being restored. It received an adults-only rating from the ESRB. The first PC title to do so in a decade. Several major retailers refused to carry it. Twitch banned all streaming of the game. The game remains in distribution. It is one of the most successful cases of a deliberately controversial title, leveraging its own censorship into commercial visibility. Its development team has spoken openly about the strategy. Battlefield 2, Special Forces, the modders edit. In 2005, a partial mod of Battlefield 2 was released depicting a hypothetical United States invasion of Iran. The mod's title was unofficial. The Iranian government banned the original game in response. The mod was withdrawn by its creators within months. Copies persist on archival sites. This is one of many cases in which a national government has banned a Western title for in-game content that publishers did not actually create. The publisher in this case did not endorse the mod. At Tier 4, the medium starts to interact with politics and law in ways the surface tier rarely discusses. At Tier 5, the interaction becomes structural. Tier 5, the industry underbelly. Practices inside game development studios that the public is generally unaware of, that the industry itself has begun slowly to discuss. Crunch culture. The video game industry has, for at least 3 decades, operated on a labor model that demands extreme overtime in the final months of a project. The 2004 open letter from EA spouse, the wife of an Electronic Arts developer, documented an environment of mandatory 90-hour weeks for 6 months at a stretch. Class. Action settlements followed. The practice did not end. The 2018 reporting on Red Dead Redemption 2's development cycle, the 2021 reporting on Cyberpunk 2077's crunch, the 2022 reporting on the development of Diablo IV, all document the same pattern. Crunch is not an aberration. It is the operating model. The companies that have ended it are the exception. The harassment scandals. In 2020, a public reckoning began at Ubisoft following allegations against multiple senior executives. In 2021, the state of California sued Activision Blizzard over allegations of widespread sexual harassment and discrimination at the company. The suit was eventually settled. Multiple executives departed. These were not isolated cases. Similar reckonings occurred at Riot Games, at Quantic Dream, at Insomniac, at Bungie. The video game industry, despite its outward youth and progressive aesthetic, has a documented internal culture that lagged the broader entertainment industry on these issues by at least a decade. The dark patterns. Beginning in the late 2000s, free-to-play and mobile games introduced monetization techniques specifically engineered to exploit behavioral compulsion. Loot boxes, randomized rewards purchased with real money, have been classified as gambling in multiple jurisdictions, including Belgium and the Netherlands. Pay-to-progress mechanics, time-gated rewards, engagement timers designed to drive habitual returns. Senior game designers have spoken publicly, sometimes anonymously, about the deliberate use of behavioral psychology research, particularly the work on variable reward schedules originally published by B.F. Skinner in the 1950 Seconds. The techniques are not accidental, they are deliberate. The asset reskin economy. An entire segment of the mobile and PC game market is built on minor reskinning of identical underlying mechanics. A small studio acquires the rights to a slot. Machine Engine, they reskin it as 10 different brand licensed games. They reskin those games as 100 different international localizations. They reskin those games as 100 different international localizations. Skin those localizations as 1,000 different cosmetic variants. The total commercial output of this segment is in the tens of billions of dollars annually. The actual underlying creative work per unit of revenue is minimal. The contracted out workforce. The industry's most invisible labor is its tester workforce. Quality assurance testers, often hired through contract agencies, work for stretches as long as a year on individual projects without benefits or job security. They sit at long banks of computers, repeating actions until something breaks, then logging the break. They are credited, rarely paid poorly, and let go at the end of every release cycle. Without them, no large modern game ships. With them, the credits scroll past their names too quickly to read when their names appear at all. At Tier 5, the games themselves become only one product of the industry. The other products are the people who make them. Tier 6. The disturbing. Games whose existence, content, or effects are by ordinary standards troubling. Rapeplay. A 2006 Japanese eroge title by Illusion Soft in which the player stalks and assaults a mother and her two daughters across Tokyo subway platforms. The game was sold legally in Japan for several years and made its way to international Amazon marketplace before being widely reported. International outrage led to Amazon delistings, parliamentary inquiries in the United Kingdom, and a 2010 ban on the broader category of rape. Content games by the Japanese Ethics Organization of Computer Software. Illusion Soft eventually closed in 2023, citing changes in market conditions. The game continues to circulate on file-sharing networks. It has not been officially distributed in over a decade. It has not been forgotten by the people who tracked its existence. Air Control and the Asset Flip Flood. Beginning in 2014, a small number of developers exploited Steam's direct submission system to release dozens of nearly identical low-quality games, sometimes built from pre-purchased asset packs with minimal modification. Air Control was a notorious early example. The game was so unplayable, glitch-ridden, and meaningless that it became a folklore item among critics. The asset flip flood persisted for years. Steam introduced barriers to entry only after extensive press coverage. Many of the original asset flips remain on Steam, owned by users, occasionally still receiving reviews. The school shooter games. In the wake of the Columbine school shootings in 1999 and several subsequent incidents, small developers produced amateur titles depicting school shootings, sometimes from the perspective of the shooters. Super Columbine Massacre, RPG 2005, was the most widely circulated. Active Shooter 2018 was withdrawn from Steam within hours of its announced launch following public outcry. These titles have generally been the work of individuals, not studios. Their distribution has been confined to niche corners of the internet. Their existence raises questions about the medium status as protected speech that no court has fully resolved. The simulation horror games. In the 2010 seconds, a category of independent game emerged that simulated, in detail, the conditions of crisis. Papers, Please simulated border, control officer work in a totalitarian state. This War of Mine simulated civilian survival during a siege based on the Bosnian War. Bury Me, My Love simulated the asynchronous text messaging of a Syrian refugee. These are not gore titles, they are not exploitation, they are deeply uncomfortable for an entirely different reason. They ask the player to inhabit, for hours at a time, the moral position of someone deciding whether their family eats today. The disturbing as art question is open. The medium is large enough to contain both Nintendo's Mario and a simulator of a refugee's escape. The same delivery technology supports both. At Tier 6, the medium's reach is wider than the brands that dominate its surface tier suggest. Tier 7, the bottom of the iceberg. At the bottom of the video games, icebergs sit a small number of artifacts and rumors that exist at the edges of what can be confirmed. Some of these are documented but unsettling, some are unverifiable but persistent. The MIT Lincoln Laboratory and the origin of the first interactive simulation. In 1962, a team of graduate students at MIT created Space War, the first widely circulated computer game, on a DEC PDP-1. The original PDP-1 was used during business hours for military research funded in part by the Department of Defense. The earliest video game in the recognizable sense was created on a machine being used for missile defense computation. The proximity of game and weapon at the moment of the medium's birth is now historical record. It is rarely emphasized in industry histories. America's Army. In 2002, the United States Army released a free first-person shooter titled America's Army, developed by Army contractors at the Modeling Virtual Environments and Simulation Institute. The game was an explicit recruitment tool. The Army released regular updates, multiple expansions, and console ports through 2022. Internal Army documents released through Freedom of Information requests indicate that the game generated significant recruitment leads, particularly among teenage players. The medium has been used as a recruitment instrument by the world's largest military for 2 decades. That use has, in some periods, been the single largest investment in video games by any government, the Cicada 3301 game Puzzle Overlap. In 2012, 2013, and 2014, the same Cicada 3301 puzzle hunts that we explore in the Internet Iceberg used video game distribution and arcade cabinet location. Clues as part of their cipher trails, solvers were directed to physical arcade cabinets in specific cities. They were directed to download specific obscure freeware titles. They were directed to identify steganography embedded in level data. The video game medium was, in this case, used as a distribution vector for what appears to have been a coordinated recruitment exercise of unknown sponsorship. No one who solved the final puzzles has publicly discussed what they found. The Sad Satan story. In 2015, a YouTuber named Obscure Horror Corner reportedly received an executable file titled Sad Satan through Tormail. The footage he uploaded showed a black and white walking simulator with disturbing imagery, audio of historic atrocities, and references to unsolved cases. The game was distributed in several variants, each apparently modified. The original distributor was never identified. The earliest variant that researchers have authenticated does not match what was shown in the original YouTube video. Sad Satan is real in that an artifact exists. It is also fake in that the artifact appears to have been deliberately constructed as an internet horror project, possibly by multiple anonymous parties. The original is one of the most cited examples of what is sometimes called dark web folklore, the simulation hypothesis as game design. In 2003, philosopher Nick Bostrom published a paper arguing that given sufficient computational resources, a sufficiently advanced civilization would likely run ancestor simulations of its history from the simulation's interior. The simulated would be unable to distinguish their world from a base reality. The paper has been widely discussed since. The video game industry has, since the early 2000s, increasingly thought about its products as nested simulations. The Sims franchise is the most direct example. Several recent independent titles, Universal Paperclips, Stanley Parable, The Beginner's Guide, explicitly use the game as simulation premise as a narrative device. At the bottom of the iceberg, the medium reaches a question it cannot answer: what is the philosophical relationship between a video game and the world that contains its players? The medium is too young to know. At the surface, you have the mainstream stories the industry tells about itself. Beneath the surface, the cult mysteries that have circulated among gamers for decades. Beneath that, the lost and canceled projects that exist only in fragments. Beneath that, the games that were banned, withdrawn, or destroyed. Beneath that, the labor and monetization practices the industry has spent decades not discussing. Beneath that, the games whose existence is, by ordinary standards, troubling. And at the bottom, the artifacts and folklore at the edges of what can be confirmed. Military recruitment tools, anonymous distributions, philosophical questions the medium is too young to answer. 54 years ago, the medium did not exist. Today, it produces more revenue than film and music combined. What it contains beneath that revenue is older and stranger than its surface tier suggests. The cabinet hums. The screen waits.